morning, my name is Jessica MacRae and this is my showcase and reflection from professional experience. The school I was at was a medium-sized Brisbane school with a significant EALD population at 28% and a small yet still significant Indigenous population of 5%. The school I was at was rather low socioeconomic and had quite a large number of disadvantaged students. The NAPLAN data compared with all Australian students was somewhat disheartening in that they were performing below or close to in a lot of areas. However, when compared with students of a similar background, the school I was at actually performed above in quite a substantial amount of areas. So that was nice. The class I designed my intervention for was a whole class intervention, and the assessment they were working towards was a persuasive speech, arguing whether satire is an effective genre for conveying a social or political message. The achievement standards, 48% of students had previously achieved an A in the term before, and 48% of students had achieved a B previously. And one student was sitting on a C, however, he was still a very capable learner. Stage 1 was in week 1, and I conducted some diagnostic pre-testing as an entry strategy for my planning. So I had the students watch a satirical video, and then it was a cut and paste activity where they needed to cut and paste examples of evidence and an example of analysed evidence into the correct boxes and match them to the correct device. Many students were really capable at identifying the satirical devices. However, some of them struggled a little bit more at identifying the evidence and the appropriate analysis to match. So from that data, the goal of it was really just to gauge the students' prior knowledge of satirical devices, because they were expected to have some from the previous term when this unit was actually begun in the last few weeks. And also we wanted to test their ability to differentiate evidence from analysis and to also match the two correctly. Students were also expected to have prior knowledge of what evidence and analysis looks like from previous year levels and units. However, at this point, I wasn't expecting them to produce any written work. The pre-testing was really just to guide my future planning in the unit. And the data collected was mostly verbal feedback in the class, and I also walked around the room and conducted my own observations. The answers were discussed as a whole class, and some deficiencies were identified. Almost all students were confident at identifying the satirical devices and evidence. However, they struggled with matching them the correct analysis to the evidence. So that really showed me that the analysis and evaluation stage was still lacking. So my planned intervention, based on the data I collected and also correlating to their assessment, was to enhance their analysis and evaluation of satirical devices. So the decision to focus on this element was made after carefully reviewing the diagnostic data and looking closely at the rubric requirement on their assessment. Analysis and evaluation were two of the main capabilities being assessed on the rubric, and I also understood that they're going to be reoccurring skills the students will have to have in future year levels and different faculties. The underpinning pedagogy and theories that shaped most of my planning were the gradual release of responsibility model and Mazzano's The New Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. The GRR model was actually the school's chosen model, so that worked well for me because I was already familiar and it's what they required. Here we can see my link to the curriculum standard and my link to assessment. Also, the learning intention, as previously stated, was to extend the existing skills of students in analysis and evaluation through a series of scaffolded learning experiences. The link to the curriculum standard is the Analyse and Evaluate standard, and the elaborations prompt students to consider, question, identify, and explain satirical events, stereotypes, and it was very relevant to the unit we were working on. And by looking at their assessment, I could see that they were required to provide discerning analysis and discerning evaluation, and also subtle and complex evaluation. So I knew that they were important skills to develop further. The policies and framework underpinning my intervention. This is the reading and writing framework from my school. Multiple steps of this framework were continuously embedded deliberately into my chosen intervention, particularly step 3, 4, and 5 were very relevant because they really prompted students into that higher order thinking and to deepen their understanding of complex ideas and to also synthesize, analyze, and respond to text-dependent questions. So they were very relevant to our teaching. This is also the school's model for annotating. I tried to incorporate this into the learning because I think annotating a text can be a really good way of actively reading and enhancing the comprehension. And I knew that that would eventually help their analysis and evaluation later. The gradual release of responsibility model was also used throughout every learning experience, which was really helpful, I believe. And finally, I like to look at Mazzano's new taxonomy for guidance as to where the students should be progressing to. So I felt from my initial data, they were still at applying and understanding, and I wanted to move them up to analysing and evaluating as per the curriculum standard and their assessment. So learning experience 1, based on my initial data, I used the gradual release of responsibility model to do a redo activity on the board. The question was displayed and I wrote the answer for the students on the board as well. It was a very conversational activity. I got a lot of student input, which really helped me to understand how their thinking was going and what level they were at. I also included prompting questions to aid their evaluation better. So was it powerful, appropriate, disadvantage anyone in the process, or create more ambiguity? Was it engaging yet still got the message across? So they were looking at the satirical cartoon on the right. And then as a class, we did the reader responding to that question. Then after modeling, the next stage was to collect data to see how well that had worked. So they had to fill out this table. As you can see, it was split into 3 sections of analysis. So they had to identify devices, identify the main message, and then make a judgment call on whether it was successful or not. So the students, I could tell, needed to develop the final stage further based on the examples I collected. So I collected a whole class example, but I've only displayed a few today. Most of the students were at a similar level, so it was quite good to progress them all at the same rate. This student says, no, I didn't find it funny. So they're still using personal opinion as a way to evaluate rather than a more evidence-based objective evaluation. We can see they really are confident at recognizing persuasive devices, so I didn't need to focus on that any further. Again, this student, confident with persuasive devices, relatively confident again with what the message is, especially because we discussed it as a class. However, when it comes to whether or not the text is successful, they were struggling. Here we are, another example, very similar data to the previous 2 students. Again, a limited evaluation. However, the student is beginning to use some evidence to strengthen their evaluation. They've stated that the image is using stereotypes and that made it effective. So still very low level thinking. The data from this showed me that it was evident students were beginning to move forwards in very basic analysis and evaluation. However, they were still limited to personal opinion. And it also became clear that they need to be pushed further to develop a stronger evaluation. So through scaffolding teaching resources and following the GRR model, I designed a quality exemplar to give to students to help push them further. And my goal for the next phase is to move them from understanding and applying up to evaluating and analysing on Mazzano's taxonomy. Here was my learning experience 2, my resource that I gave them. As you can see, the evaluation section on the right, I have made that a lot larger and I've modelled what an A standard would look like. And then we talked it through as a class through that explicit teaching model. And then after doing that, students were given more of a you do activity where they had to continue on with the table, having the exemplar there to help guide their work. You can see the quality and quantity of their evaluative response has really improved here. The students' work has notable improvement in detail. They have also been able to describe how persuasive devices shape the meaning, and the student has moved beyond personal opinion. They're starting to use evaluation based on how the satire positions an audience, not just them as an individual person. Again, very similar data from all of the students. Here's another example. You can see that these students are moving into far larger and more detailed responses. The student has made a more detailed evaluation, however, they're still at a basic level, and I noticed they were lacking a proper analysis as to why and why not. So that's what I wanted to move them further into. The data, the positives, show that the explicit modelling worked to quite a good extent. I was quite happy with that. The exemplar provided students with the scaffolding they needed to produce a more detailed evaluation of satirical effectiveness. And the students begin to move away from providing opinion and go into a higher order thinking. The goal for the future to implement is for students to provide a more discerning and complex evaluation and analysis. So that was my next goal. To achieve that, I designed a handout for students to use in conjunction with the next learning experience. So this is a scaffolded evaluation resource, and it gives them some prompting ideas to consider in their evaluation and analysis of the text. So it doesn't give them the answer. They still have to use their critical thinking skills to match which elements actually apply to the visual or written text they're looking at. However, it will prompt them, and I'm hoping this kind of scaffolding can really improve the quality of their response. The purpose, the students were going to be required to write a teal paragraph in pairs, and I wanted to move them into a more discerning evaluation. So I wanted to give them this resource. And I gave them a checklist as well, so that they could also annotate and mark their own work, so they knew if they were on the right track. We can see here, the step 1 in the lesson was to give them the resource. Step 2, instruct them to write a persuasive teal paragraph. And then step 3, they highlight the things in their paragraph. So the theme, the message, the satirical devices and evidence, their evaluation, and their persuasive devices. And finally, I wanted to give them a chance to write themselves some feedback for next time. So again, that self-awareness, how good is their evaluation? What could make it stronger? Here we go. Here is a student response. You can see the quality and quantity has really improved. They've got that self-awareness, and they're developing a much stronger analysis and evaluation. They're using the school's highlighting model to highlight the key elements, which is really good to see. Again, with this pair, they've also done a good job. The student uses modality in a really good way to say that the text was somewhat effective, and then they justify why they only gave it a somewhat evaluation rather than 100% effective. So they've really justified their decisions. And again, with these students, a good paragraph, they're demonstrating that they're really starting to get their heads around the evaluation and analysis. They're giving a detailed and objective evaluation of effectiveness. And they're again giving themselves feedback, which shows that self-awareness for improvement. Again, similar evidence in this. All students in the class seem to be at a similar level by this point, and the student obviously used the table when they say that the article is engaging and allows freedom of speech. However, some context is needed in order to understand it. So that's a really detailed response, and they're clearly using the scaffolded resource that I provided for them, so that's good to see them engaging. The final results showed it was a success, and I was really happy with how the students were going, to be honest. And improvements, I would like to get jumping in sooner, because the first week was very overwhelming. It took me until the second week to really get the intervention off the ground and to start implementing it. So next time I would like to be a little bit more prepared. And I would also like to incorporate more ways for assessing improvement. So perhaps an exit slip where students do a survey, and then I can get some one-on-one detailed feedback about how they feel, which I think is also really important to judge student confidence. These are my references. Thanks very much.